Small Spaces, 19. In the strange shadow world, Linda Webster's fresh-painted farmhouse was faded, old, and ugly. Its door hung a little open, making Ollie think of spiders' webs. If we were the flies. But she marched forward anyway. Just as she got to the open door, with Brian and Coco too far back to hear, Ollie glanced down at her watch. Up, it said. Ollie looked up, but there was nothing there. Despite herself, she whispered, "Mom, is that you? Can you hear me?" Silence, only the rustling of corn. Then the screen flickered. "Always," it said. Ollie closed her eyes, pressed the watch to her lips, felt herself shake. "I want to talk to you," she said, softer still. Silence. "Up," the watch said again. Ollie glanced back into the farmyard. Had all the scarecrows been facing the house before? Because all those faces, every single one of those scarecrow faces, was pointed toward the front door. "Guys," said Ollie, "look, have the scarecrows—" Brian and Coco turned and shuddered. All the scarecrows had their hands up. A light glinted dully on the tips of the rakes, the edges of scythes and trowels. "Yes," said Brian, "they definitely moved." "Come inside," said Ollie, trying to sound as brave as she could. "Let's look around. We just have to hurry." She went into the house with her two friends at her heels. The floorboards creaked. The wallpaper was coming off in streamers. A little thin daylight trickled in the dirty windows, but shadows seemed to lie thick in the corners. To their right lay a sitting room with torn pink fabric on the walls. In front of them was a staircase leading up into the blackness of the second floor. To the left was the kitchen. "Hello?" called Coco. "Is anyone here?" No answer. Ollie looked at her watch. 45 minutes, 16 seconds, said the countdown. Up. Ollie headed into the kitchen. Coco and Brian followed. There was no sound but the squeaking floorboards. The kitchen was full of old-fashioned plates and cups and pots, all covered with a thick layer of dust. The wood stove was rusty, the wood beside it bone dry. "I think we should go upstairs," said Ollie. "My watch says up." Brian was already poking through the woodpile. "Hang on, there's kindling here," he said. "I'm going to make a fire, if I can find some matches." "And let everyone know we're here?" Ollie snapped. Brian shrugged. "The scarecrows know already," he pointed out. "If anyone else is out there, they probably know too. I'm cold, you're cold, Coco's got wet feet, and she's probably really cold." Coco's small face looked pale and pinched under Ollie's rainbow hat. "Just a bit cold," she said stubbornly. "You'll be a lot warmer with dry socks," said Brian. "We'll make a fire and dry them. Tell your mom to buy you wool socks next time. Cotton's no good." "If the chimney's blocked, you'll burn the house down," Ollie warned, but only half-heartedly. Brian was right. Coco was really pale. They didn't want her getting sick. "Well," said Brian, with a ghost of good cheer, "let's find out." He began to lay a fire. "I bet Coco'd kill for dry socks, let alone risk burning the house down." "You do that," Ollie said. "I'm still going upstairs." "I don't think we should split up," said Coco. What if a bad thing comes?" "It's not dark yet," Ollie said. "That's not the only bad thing," cried Coco. "What about the ghost?" "She wasn't bad," said Ollie, "just dead." Coco looked exasperated. "She was scary. I'm staying down here," she said, just as Brian cried, "Matches!" He popped out of the pantry, covered in cobwebs, waving a dusty old matchbox. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" asked Coco. But she looked happier than she had in a while. Who could blame her? Even Ollie was cold, and she was wearing more clothes and was used to being outside all the time. "Yep," said Brian. He began putting wood in the stove. "Hope it works," said Coco eagerly. Ollie unzipped her backpack and pulled out her unicorn lunchbox. She broke off a piece of the pumpkin pie and put the rest on the table. "Here," said Ollie, "we should all eat something before it gets dark. Try not to burn the house down. I'm going upstairs." Ollie marched off, chomping her portion of the slice of pie, leaving Brian and Coco going through her lunchbox on the scarred kitchen table. A little fire had begun to sputter in the stove. Ollie wondered if she wasn't doing something really dumb, going off by herself. The first bedroom was just to the right of the top of the staircase. The wallpaper had a pattern of cherries, which should have been cheerful, except the paper was stained and the only light came from the gloomy outdoors. The bed had a moth-eaten red blanket, a vanity table with empty bottles, a bookcase. Ollie paused in the doorway, glancing behind her. Nothing, just a hallway with stairs at one end and the other dark end. Ollie bit her lip. Each step she took made the floor creak. Ollie crept closer to the bookcase. A Bible, a Book of Common Prayer, a Child's Guide to Virtue, Mrs. Beardsley's Domestic Sciences. Another floorboard creaked. It took her a moment to realize it wasn't her. She whirled. Steps, coming from the darkness at the end of the hall. Soft, steady steps. Ollie froze. A hand appeared in the doorframe, a thin, yellow-nailed hand. Then a face popped around the edge of the doorframe. A gasp came strangling out of Ollie's throat. It was a woman, or had been. Her skin was sunken in beneath the cheekbones, and when she smiled, her lips stretched too wide, the way of skull smiles. She stood in the doorway, blocking Ollie's escape. "Who are you?" Ollie whispered. Her voice came out thin and scared. A dry whisper murmured back, "My name is Beth Webster." Ollie's spine was pressing up against the bookcase. "Beth Webster is dead." The woman in the doorway said nothing, but her smile grew and grew humorlessly until it took up her entire lower face. Ollie had to bite back a scream. "I died in this room," whispered the woman. The rustle of her clothes sounded like dead leaves on the other side of the mist. "How did you get to this side?" Ollie managed to ask around her dry throat. "Jonathan is here," Beth said. She clasped her hands together, long-fingered and bony. "The dead go where they will, and I wouldn't leave him. Wouldn't leave the farm when I was alive, and won't leave him now. Even the smiling man can't make me. He'd like it, though. Oh, yes, he would." "Why?" Ollie asked. Her lungs felt squeezed with fright. "Because he doesn't have any power over the dead," said Beth. "And I'm not forgetting myself like Kathy did. Poor Kathy Webster. There's not much left of her now." "Forgetting yourself?" asked Ollie. "Is Kathy forgetting herself? But why is she here? Because her sons are?" "Yes," said Beth. "Kathy wouldn't leave her children, not for anything. But that's what happens to ghosts. Their minds go, and then you are only memory, doing the same things over and over." "Then why aren't you like that?" asked Ollie. She had begun to recover from her fright. Beth was scary, but she just stood in the doorway and looked. "I wrote a book," said Beth thoughtfully. "I think that's why. I put myself into it all my days and nights and hopes and dreams, my whole life. I think my book is the reason I still remember, although maybe it would have been easier to forget." Maybe that's why the smiling man wanted Linda Webster to get rid of the book, Ollie thought, to stop Beth from hanging around. Ollie thought of the watch's instruction, up. Maybe Beth Webster knew something important. "Do you know how my friends and I can get home?" she asked. "Do you know how to turn the scarecrows back into people? Do you know how to beat the smiling man?" The ghost laughed, a long, shrill burst. "The smiling man is older than old," said Beth, still grinning. "You can't beat him. You might be happier in the corn with him. At least scarecrows feel nothing." "Shut up," snapped Ollie. "We aren't going to be scarecrows. I'm going home to my dad. How do we get home?" "The cornfield is the doorway," said the ghost. "It's a maze, a corn maze. The scarecrows exist here and there. They are neither flesh nor spirit. They hold the door open for him. They are his servants in this world and his gatekeepers in the other." Big tears, as horrible as her laughter, ran down her bony nose. "And I am only a ghost, and my love is a scarecrow, and the servant of that horrible man." Her sad mouth seemed to droop down her face as though the skin was rotten. "How do we change the scarecrows back?" Ollie asked, torn between pity and horror. "I do not know. Until the mist becomes rain, Jonathan told me once. But I don't know what that means. I'm sorry," she said with a new note in her voice. "You have to go now." That was when Ollie heard her watch beeping insistently. She realized how thick the shadows had grown. She looked down at her watch. 5 minutes. "I should have told you sooner," whispered Beth Webster. She was crying, dusty, waterless tears. I'm sorry, but what was the use? You're never leaving this place. Never, never, never."